At the beginning of the series, we see a young and beautiful girl named Jamarwan. She was trying to find a good job to support her family, which consisted of her father, her mother, and her younger brother, who had special needs, and his name was Wafi. One day, Miran received a call informing her that she had been rejected from the job she applied for. At that moment, she was sitting and eating with her family, feeling sad, when her phone rang again. Someone invited her to participate in a variety experiments show, which was run by a rich and handsome man named Madden. In the next scene, we see Miran taking part in the show, going through dangerous challenges, all to earn some money for her family. In these experiments, she was forced to fly and pull a truck, risking her life. Despite this, Dong was very impressed by her bravery and performance. Later, Dong won the award for the most popular TV program because of his show, Variety Experiments. At the award ceremony, he introduced his girlfriend, who was a news anchor, and it was clear they had been together for a long time. After that, Dong wanted to completely transform his show and do something new and different. He came up with a freezing experiment, where people would be put in capsules and frozen alive for 24 hours. The only issue was that he wanted to extend the time because if the experiment succeeded, it could allow people with untreatable diseases in their time to be frozen and later revived, hoping that in the future a cure would be found. He also wanted a girl to participate in the experiment to compare the effects of freezing on males and females, and he wanted to film the entire experiment and stream it live. Dong sent his assistant, Hyunji, to meet Miran and offer her the chance to participate. At the same time, he spoke with his girlfriend Young and told her he wanted to participate too. At first, she hesitated, but after Dong persuaded her, she agreed. Elsewhere, Hyunji met Miran at a restaurant and tried to convince her to join, but Miran was very scared and refused the offer because the experiment was dangerous. Later, she went to a fortune teller and asked when she would meet her boyfriend. The fortune teller said she would meet him in 20 years, and the weather around them would be very cold. Meanwhile, Dong Jara, the channel head, tried to convince Hong Soo to broadcast the experiment on the channel, but Hong refused. When Dong told him the experiment would bring them huge profits and fame, Hong immediately agreed. Dong then met Miran and asked her to participate, telling her that if she agreed, he would get signatures from all the celebrities to give to her brother and also provide her with a large sum of money. Miran agreed. That night, both of them were frozen in their capsules. We see Hyunji filming the entire experiment, while the scientist who invented it was present but had not yet revealed the secret of reversing the freezing process. Hong entered the lab and asked everyone to leave, instructing his apprentice to watch the volunteers until some tasks were finished. NG noticed a car following him, and suddenly his car exploded and flipped in the middle of the road. Back in the lab, the experiment time ended. Since the scientist hadn't revealed the secret of reversing the process, he was confused and unsure what to do. Suddenly, all the capsules disappeared, including Dong's and Miran's. The next day, the police were searching for the missing people. At that moment, Hong, the channel head, called Hyunji and instructed him to hide all evidence related to the experiment as quickly as possible. In the next scene, we see Miran meeting Young. He told her what had happened and asked her to stay silent, but she refused, saying she could never betray her boyfriend. She was offered the position of main anchor for the 9 p.m. news show and agreed. Young started her job the same day and reported the disappearance of the 6 volunteers. The news was shocking, especially for those closely connected to the missing people. Everyone began remembering the happy moments they had shared. Young, in particular, remembered her first meeting with Dong and cried a lot, regretting that she had accepted the offer. At the same time, we see a secret room, which is the same capsule preservation lab. We discover that the scientist is still alive and present in the lab. During this period, Miran's family and Dong's family were going through a very difficult time because they were extremely worried about their father. After a while, Miran received an envelope containing pictures of their daughter, sent by her father to reassure them that she was okay, with instructions to keep this news a secret for her safety. However, Both families didn't believe it and thought the envelope was just a trick. Months later, Miran's family business failed, forcing them to leave the city. Meanwhile, Miran's friends were celebrating their graduation, but she missed them deeply. 20 years after these events, Hong Sak became the CEO of the media company, and Hyunji was put in charge of the Variety Experiments program. We also see that Miran became one of the main anchors at the Newsline channel. At the same time, Ki Byum was attending an international conference when he suddenly received a notification on his iPad alerting him to unusual activity in the lab. He grabbed the iPad quickly to check, and discovered that Dr. Hong had woken up and gotten out of bed. Ki Byum immediately left the conference, got into his car, and rushed to the lab. Meanwhile, Ki Byum was reversing the freezing process of the capsules to end the experiment that had started 20 years ago. He went to Miran and Dong's capsules, opened them, injected them with a strange serum, and they both fainted. Afterward, Miran and Dong woke up from the freezing, and the two left the lab before Ki Byum arrived. Miran walked toward her home, while Dong went to the studio where he had been working. But unfortunately, Dong fainted due to the extreme heat, because no one can just exit freezing and walk down the street safely. He was taken to the hospital, where the doctors were very surprised, because all his vital signs were normal except that his body temperature was below average. Dong regained consciousness and asked the doctors to contact his assistant and inform him that he was in the hospital, even though the doctors had no idea who he was referring to. They called the number he provided, and the doctor asked Hyunji if he knew someone named Dong. Hyunji couldn't believe it, and went elsewhere to meet Dong away from his children. Dong had prepared Hyunji, because he hadn't recorded his experiment, and had left him alone in the lab, seemingly unaware that he had been frozen for 20 years. At the same time, Dong's family learned he was in the hospital, and upon seeing him, they fainted one after another. Later, Young called Hong and informed him that Dong was still alive, and that his position and career were now at risk. Others overheard the call and immediately left what they were doing to rush to the company. We then see Miran, who arrives at her home only to find it empty. She assumed her parents had been evicted because they couldn't pay the rent. She went to the police station and reported what had happened, and the officers were shocked by her ID and her age. Miran asked to make a phone call and tried to reach her mother, but she didn't answer, so she left a voicemail. When her mother heard the message, she rushed to the police station to see her daughter, but Miran had already left. Now, Miran was at her university. There, people told her they hadn't seen her for a long time. Miran didn't understand, so she ran through the streets, and realized it was the year 2019, not 1999. 20 years had passed. At the university, she saw a sign confirming it was 2019. In this scene, we see Miran and Dong shocked by what they are witnessing, unable to believe they had been asleep for 20 years. Miran's family brought her to the university, then to their new house, which was very beautiful. She was amazed by the home, and they told her that they had invested the money they had taken from her before the freezing, started a business, and purchased this house from the profits. Their life had become very comfortable. Despite her long absence, they had prepared a room just for her, which made her very happy. Later, we see Dong at home with his family. Although they had been very wealthy before the freezing experiment, now they lived in a smaller house and only had a restaurant that they relied on for income. Dong discovered that his brother had married and had a beautiful little daughter, but sadly, his father had passed away years ago, which made him sad. Meanwhile, they discussed Dong's return and how their professional lives were at risk, because he could discover the experiment they had conducted decades ago. At the same time, Dong went to the lab to find out what had happened to him and the other volunteers. There, he met someone who told him that 20 years ago, someone had tried to kill Dr. Huang, but fortunately, Dr. Huang survived. They had to fake his death to protect him from people who wanted to kill him. Strangely, Dr. Huang had recently woken up from his coma, performed resuscitation for Dong and Miran, and then returned to the coma. Dong spoke with him about the person who attempted the murder, who was interested in the field of freezing. Afterward, Dong called his girlfriend, Young, and asked her to meet him at a cafe. She agreed immediately. When she arrived, he was surprised and at the same time upset that she had grown up. He apologized for leaving her alone all these years. Young forgave him, saying she was just happy he was alive. Suddenly, she started crying and told him they would talk later, then left the cafe. Meanwhile, in the lab, they were monitoring a dolphin, and we learned that this dolphin had also been frozen like Dong and Miran. Unfortunately, the dolphin died due to natural environmental conditions. At that moment, Dong realized that he and Miran could also die, so he spoke to his team, saying he was the only one who could save them. Unfortunately, he was still in a coma, and no one knew when he would wake up. Dong called Dom and instructed him to keep his body temperature below 33 degrees Celsius. At that moment, Miran appeared and slapped Dong for wasting 20 years of her life while she was asleep in the capsule. She demanded a large sum of money as compensation. Dong told her he had also been a victim of the experiment and couldn't help her. Afterward, Miran went to her university and told them she wanted to continue her education. Some time later, she met her old boyfriend, who had studied with her, but he was now a professor. Miran couldn't recognize him and passed by as if she hadn't seen him. Dong went to the studio and asked to return and host his show, but the manager cleverly persuaded him not to, fearing that Dong would reveal the freezing experiment, which could cause a disaster for everyone. Dong then worked as a junior director, and as soon as he was appointed, he tried to get things under control. Later, he met the director, who said she was free that weekend and wanted to meet him. He immediately agreed and rushed to see his old girlfriend. Meanwhile, Miran checked her email at home and was delighted to find messages from her friends. We also learned that her mother never told her friends she had disappeared. Instead, she said she went to America to continue her studies. When Miran went out to eat with her family, her mother told her she could relax a bit because their life had improved, and she no longer needed to work so hard to cover expenses. Miran went to the university and attended a lecture, and by coincidence, her old boyfriend Byung-shim was her lecturer. Miran couldn't recognize him, but Byung-shim recognized her and started shaking when he saw her, even falling in front of the entire lecture hall. Dong started his new job, and on his first day, an annoying employee named Park began to bully him. At that moment, Hyunji entered and saw them arguing. He kicked Park out and told him to treat Dong respectfully, though he couldn't teach his staff proper etiquette. Hyunji then held a meeting with all employees, asking them to present new ideas for the show. When Dong's turn came, his ideas were old and basic, so no one approved them. Soon after, Nurin called Hyunji and asked for his help. Hyunji ran to Hong and explained what she had said. At the same time, the scientist Enji regained consciousness, but unfortunately, he had lost his memory. Ki Byum did everything he could to restore it, even showing him the freezing capsules he had designed himself, but Enji couldn't remember anything. Later, Miran went to the media company to request compensation for the 20 years she spent in freezing, giving them a daily rate. When Hong and Young calculated the total, it exceeded 5 billion. Hong refused to pay, telling her she was still young, alive, and could start her life over. In the next scene, Miran sent an email to her closest friends asking to meet, and 2 of them agreed. They were shocked that she was still young and beautiful, and asked her about her secret. Since Miran was not allowed to talk about the experiment, she told them she had used very powerful cosmetic creams from America. At the same time, Dong met his girlfriend Young and told her she was still very beautiful after all these years. She then pulled out her phone and showed him an article about him and the freezing experiment. Similarly, Miran's friends didn't believe the story about the creams. Dong's family saw the article and decided to confront him, but his niece suggested that his fame could benefit the family business and make them wealthy again. Later, Don Jara went to the lab and met Dong, who was behind other capsules containing the remaining frozen volunteers. He told him that when he woke up, his body temperature had been 31, and he had to ensure it did not exceed 33. Dong left the lab and went to the police station, where he met the officer in charge of the investigation into Dr. Hong's attempted assassination. There, he saw pictures of the main suspect and the experiment performed 20 years ago. He realized that no one even knew the experiment had been done. The scene then shifts to Lucio, the CEO of a very large company. He ordered his men to gather all information about the experiment and check if Dong was alive, because if he was, he needed to be eliminated immediately. To everyone's surprise, Lucio turned out to be an exact copy of someone in the freezing capsules. Afterward, Donjara had an argument with Hyunji for not reporting Dong's disappearance or checking on him. Hyunji defended himself, saying it was his fault because he had instructed him to act that way. At the same time, Miran arrived at the media company to ask Dong to hire her. In the final scene, we see Young watching Dong closely because she had not reported his disappearance to the police in the past. Here, our story comes to an end. Don't forget to support us by liking and subscribing to the channel.